Well, now we're going to have a look at some of HOS's own work. In a moment, we'll hear about marsh tits, but first let's hear about Dartford Warblers, the survey that many of you took part in last year. Now, Rob Clements organised that along with Nigel Matthews, who sadly can't be here today. Rob started his life, I think, in Hampshire, then moved to Kent, where he focused on particularly rare birds of prey. But to our benefit and Kent's cost, he came back to Hampshire a few years ago. He now plays a key role on our scientific subcommittee, and he's also an advisor to the Rare Breeding Bird Panel. So he's going to start by looking at how we've surveyed birds in the New Forest over recent years, and then focus on the Dartford Warbler. Please welcome Rob Clements.
Okay. Can you hear me? Good. Hopefully you can see this.
Yep. Is that what you want?
Yep, that's fine. As Keith said, last year, Nigel Matthews and myself organised the Dartford Warbler survey, one of a continuing series of surveys for numerous New Forest species. I thought it'd be interesting to start off, though, by looking at the species that we were surveying more than 60 years ago in the forest. 1961 was quite an important year in Hampshire Ornithological Society history. It was a year that the first Chetty's warbler was found in Hampshire. It was the year that firecrests were first found in the New Forest in the breeding season. Two straws in the wind of a changing climate. So if you look back at 1961, on the left-hand side, I've shown the priority species then, and the line across to last year gives some indication on how much survey effort has gone into those species over that period. So the top one, honey buzzard, surveying started in 1954, and honey buzzards have been surveyed in the forest every year since. So we've got a data set for more than 70 years now for that species. Dartford Warbler, third one down, was surveyed in 1961 and has been surveyed on and off over the last 60 years. Not every year, sometimes there's a 10-year gap. Above that, hobby, another species that birders have always been interested in. The New Forest has always held an important population. And there's been periods during which hobbies have been of interest, and then some 10-year gaps where no surveys were carried out. Two other species at the bottom, Montague's harrier and red-backed shrike, two important species in the forest in 1961. There were 57 pairs of red-backed shrike found in a survey that year on the forest, and there were 2 pairs of Montague's harriers that nested that year. Sadly, both species no longer with us. Montague's harrier doesn't appear to be breeding anywhere in Britain nowadays. Red-backed shrike is just a very occasional breeding species. So what I take from this is the amazing rate of change in bird populations, even in a small area like the New Forest. On the right-hand side, lower down, you can see that wood warbler in recent years has become a species of interest. And I will show graphs later on that will show how their population has changed. Hawfinch, lesser-spotted woodpecker, marsh tit, 3 species that probably nobody would have been interested in surveying in 1961. Relatively common birds in the wider countryside. But nowadays, the New Forest has become a very important area for all 3 species, and a lot of survey work has gone into them. Hawfinch, over the last 15 years, Marcus Ward has done fantastic work on hawfinch population in the forest. Ken and Linda Smith and their interest in lesser-spotted woodpecker. Lots of people are now interested in that, and lots of people do work on that in the forest. And in the last couple of years, marsh tit has become another species of interest. 2 species shown lower down that weren't surveyed in 1961. One of them, firecrest. Firecrests, as I mentioned, were found in the forest in 1961, and breeding was proven in 1962, the first breeding in Britain And that's a species that has been surveyed subsequently, and in recent years has become so numerous that nobody bothers surveying it anymore. There are probably several thousand pairs of firecrest now in the forest. And finally, the goshawk appeared in the forest in 2002 and has gone to, the population has increased enormously in that time. Move on. Okay. Just thought it would be interesting to look at woodland bird species, some of the woodland bird species that I'm particularly interested in. And I've tried to show, whereas hawfinch and lesser spotted woodpecker, I put a dotted line in running at about 300 to 400 pairs for both species over the last 60 years. I don't really know whether the population's been stable over that time. We don't have enough information really. But from what we know, the population certainly appears to be stable now. Two species where there's been very rapid change. Firecrest, the bottom one, you can see that since they were found in 1962, the population bobbled along at a fairly low level up until around the turn of the century. And then suddenly the population exploded and it's gone up, as you can see, now around 700 pairs in 2016 and is probably much higher than that now. Probably has stabilized since then. By contrast, the yellow line coming down shows wood warbler that used to be a very common species in the New Forest. Population started to fall around 1990. By the time of the last BTO atlas, the population was thought to be about 250 pairs. And in the 10 years subsequent to that, there's been a further dramatic fall. Last year, I'm told there were about a dozen singing males in the whole forest, and perhaps 4 or 5 breeding pairs. So that appears to be a species that's on its way to extinction in the New Forest. And a quick look at raptor species in the forest. The main feature, you can see goshawks arriving in 2002, when 2 pairs were found in the forest. And the population has just dramatically risen. There are probably 75 pairs of goshawks now within the wider New Forest, including all the private woodland around the edges. And there appears to be an effect, obviously, on that. You can see that sparrowhawk population and the hobby population have both shown a fall in the years since goshawk arrived. It seems unlikely that that's coincidental. 2 other species, common buzzard, shown in blue. There's been a fantastic survey since 1961 where the common buzzard population was monitored. You can see there was a fall in the population in the 1980s, probably due to food supply, and then the population started increasing and has gone up, but it probably has stabilized in recent years. And then finally, honey buzzards, never been more than 7 or 8 pairs in the forest in any one year, but they've always been present and they, as far as we know, will continue. Seems so far goshawks are not having an effect on them. Finally, get on to Dartford warblers. There was a survey in 1961, and about 2/3 of the forest was covered. Around 250 pairs of Dartford warblers were found. I extrapolated the population was around 350 pairs that year. The next survey, 1963, found only 6 pairs, and that's after the catastrophic cold winter of 1962-63. By 1966, only 2 pairs of Dartfords were found in the forest. It took quite a while for the population to recover. In 1974, there were 250 found. But by the 1980s, the population was up to 450, 500, which seemed to be the sort of ceiling for the population. We carried out a survey in 2018, which followed the beast from the east, a period of very cold and snowy weather in February, early March. And that year, we only found 143 pairs within the forest. As Keith has said, we won the tender to do a further survey in 2023, and we found at least 570 pairs of Dartford warblers, showing that the population had sprung back to sort of the level that you would expect after 4 or 5 years of mild winters. This is a map showing all the Dartford warbler territories that we found last year. 571 purple dots. All these maps will be reproduced in a big report in the Hampshire Bird Report that will come out later this year. This is a report that goes to all the stakeholders in the New Forest. It's commissioned by Forestry England. And on a 5-year cycle, HOS usually bids for the contract to do the survey, and we have been very successful recently. We obviously have a large workforce, 70, 80 volunteers who don't have to get paid. So we have a big advantage over any private companies that tender for that work. Plus, we also do a very good job because we have a huge weight of experience in the forest. Okay. In the forest, the density of Dartford warblers varies. These are 1 kilometre squares over the major areas of heathland. You can see some of the squares are sort of darker purple, have up to 19 or 20 pairs of Dartfords within a 1 kilometre square. Other areas, the habitat is not so good. Bewley Heath East, up in the southeast there, quite a lot of squares. No Dartfords found at all, and lower numbers in most of the squares. Differential habitat over the forest area. It's not just the New Forest that has Dartford warblers. Obviously, the heathland in the northeast and the east of Hampshire, survey by John Clark and John Eyre, has been carried out every year for the last 50 years. So there's usually about 300 pairs of Dartford warblers on those heaths as well, to go with the 500, 600 pairs in the New Forest. So we're getting close to 1,000 pairs of Dartford warbler within Hampshire nowadays. And finally, this is a map showing the change between 2018, when we carried out the survey after the cold winter, and then last year's survey. And the green squares show where they were found in 2023, but not found during the previous survey. So you can see in all areas of Dartford warblers range, there's been a big increase and expansion of range consequent on the mild winters since then. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much.